You've probably watched many videos on understanding perspective already. I hope that it's making sense to you in some way. But there's a difference between understanding a video explanation and applying it to our drawings. This video is about a great test or exercise, if you like, to do with some of our drawings to check how much of these perspective videos have actually made it into our drawings. Let's look at 3 of my drawings which I've discovered doing this exercise have a few more perspective issues than perhaps I thought when I first drew them. And then why don't you repeat this exercise with a couple of your drawings and see how you're going putting perspective theory into practice. One of the best things about this test is that it's so simple and it really just relies on the most basic of perspective theory, and that's that all these perspective angle lines, as I call them, meet at a single point. Now it's on the eye level, or the horizon you might call it, but we don't even have to worry about finding the eye level in this test, and we can test one or several points as long as we understand that these perspective angles are all meant to converge at the same spot. This is the way we can check our drawings. And if you've watched my videos, you've certainly seen me use these coloured strips. Not just are they a great way to show what I'm going to do, they're a great way for us to check what we've done. So can I suggest that you slice up a coloured piece of cardboard and make some for your own use? Let's start with our first drawing. Now, while this isn't a simple drawing, it's a relatively simple one-point perspective drawing. And the good thing is it has some very strong perspective angles. And by that, I mean these lines here, which are all meant to meet at the same point. And so what I need to do is just place these lines over the top and see whether in fact they all meet up. So in fact, are there any problem ones? Let me have a look. What about this line? This is a line in the paving. It's not quite as tight as the other ones are, but it's certainly not obvious. The other place where we have a number of perspective lines that we haven't looked at yet is in this coffered ceiling. So let's just check some of these. So that one doesn't look as accurate as it could be. This one is nowhere near as accurate as the other lines in this drawing. That one's okay. That one's not as bad as some, but it's not as good as most of the other lines. What this tells me is when I got to this section of the drawing, I stopped paying as much attention to getting these perspective angles nice and tight for this viewpoint. How did I go on the other side? On the left-hand side, my perspective angles up in this part of the ceiling are fine. And now that I've alerted myself to it, I can see that while these angles angle nicely, these ones would look a little more natural if they just angled out slightly more. Now, of course, we do these. Of course, we critique our drawings to give ourselves a focus in our future drawings. And what this is telling me is I need to pay as much attention when I get to the corners of my drawing as I do when I'm doing the main central elements. Let's have a look at an exterior view of a building. Now we need to do the same thing. We get our main perspective lines and we look to see where they meet up, which is going to be around here. So far, they're looking okay, I think. This one looks like it's coming a bit too steeply down. This one also looks like it's too steep in comparison with these lines. Another great way to check our angles is to check where we have points on the building which line up horizontally, such as in this triangular cornice over the main entrance. These two corners should line up in this same fan-shaped pattern of perspective angles. So if I put this one on the tips of the two corners, I can see, in fact, that it's not going to be in line with these lower lines. What if I look at some of these upper lines? Now, firstly, these two towers align with each other, so this line and this line should line up on the one line, but that's not going to happen. So if I look at this one, I can see that it's too shallow an angle. It needs to come down more. If I look at this one, it's going to finish well to the left of all the other lines. These two lines should be the same line, and clearly they're not. What does doing this exercise tell me to watch out for? It tells me to have a little more focus on my perspective angles as I move further up and they get steeper and steeper. These lower ones work out quite well, but the higher I go, the less these angles work in with each other as tightly as possible. And particularly when I have architectural details that align in the horizontal plane, such as the fronts of these two towers, I need to work a bit harder at making sure that I align them in my drawing. Let's now look at that example that was in the thumbnail for this video. This example did surprise me because I was looking at this drawing to use as an example of interior perspective and how it all comes together. And I discovered that it didn't quite all come together in my drawing the way I was hoping. Let's work out where our perspective angles join up. So this upper section worked really well. Nice, accurate perspective angles for all the lines that go off to this vanishing point. And if I use the alignment of these pattern tiles here, that works out well too. So where's the problem? The problem came when I was looking at these lines down here. There was this line which shoots off too high, and worse still was this line down here which also goes off at too steep an angle. Now, because there's a lot of things to look at in this drawing, and because these most visually dominant lines all line up accurately, it's not obvious at a glance that there's a problem with this. But once I became aware of this, every time I look at this now, I can see that this line here shoots up at too high an angle. It should be slightly lower, more like this. And this line here also should just be angled a little bit more gently. This line's not quite as obvious simply because it's in a fairly dark area of shade and local colour. But this one is a much more visually noticeable section of the drawing. Don't get me wrong, I'm still very happy with this drawing, but it alerts me to the fact that even in fairly detailed drawings that I take quite a lot of time with, this took me probably just over 6 hours to draw, I need to pay attention that all of my perspective lines that should be meeting at the same point do, especially when they're in the center of the drawing. But the fact that it was one of the furthest points in the drawing away from the viewer fooled me into perhaps not paying the same attention to this as I did to these closer parts. So can I suggest you make some cardboard strips? You get out some of your drawings that you know you took a fair bit of effort with and check to see just how closely your perspective angles line up with all converging at the one point. And of course, we don't do this to get discouraged. We do this to give ourselves a focus for improvement. Because whatever mistakes I tend to make in one drawing, I will tend to make that same sort of mistake in other drawings. And you might have noticed that the biggest errors I had in getting the angles correct were in parts of the drawing that I felt were further away from where the focus was. And so I let my concentration lapse. So that's the focus I can bring to my next drawing. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope this was a bit of fun for you. I'm always happy to share my mistakes because this process of drawing is never automatic for any of us. We are always learning. And I'm a great believer in identifying our mistakes so that we can focus our improvement and get the most gain we can from all the time we actually put in to drawing. I really hope you found this interesting but also helpful, and please give it a go. Take the time to cut the strips and check a few of your drawings because it really will help you improve. I'll see you next time. Bye.